Hi there. My name is Ashton Mobley, and this is my personality project on Vincent van Gogh. So, who was Vincent van Gogh? Vincent van Gogh was one of the world's most renowned painters. He was born in 1853 and he died in 1890. He was born in the Netherlands and he moved shortly after being able to move out to France. He lived in Paris and a couple other areas kind of in the south side of France after that. He was a very peculiar person, and he only found success after his death. During his life, he only sold actually one painting. Also, during his life, he was plagued by multiple interesting mental illnesses that led to a lot of his artwork. And people recognized that his life was a very dark and deranged one, with his relationships and all of the things that he encountered. However, he really did look toward color and brightness whenever he was working on art, and he showed that through his pieces of work. Many people strongly believe, like I said, he had comorbid illness. So he had multiple mental disorders at once. And not much is known about his personality, just kind of stories and tales. But most people say that he was a very serious and brooding person and that he was only passionate about art, even through his lifetime of failure. So now I'm going to relate four psychological theories to Van Gogh's personality. I'll be starting with biological theory. So first off, Van Gogh's mental illnesses, they played a big role in his personality and his expression. Like I said before, with his paintings, he would express himself through his artwork, whether it would be Starry Night, which is more of a dark and brooding painting, which, fun fact, he actually created in a mental asylum. Or it could be something more colorful and like this, showing off the happy expression that he wanted to get out. His poor mental health may have been due to chemical imbalances in his brain. Although his parents weren't diagnosed with any mental illnesses and there's no genetic ladder in the family, Van Gogh still may have been genetically loaded to have those chemical imbalances himself. Also, Van Gogh almost always used bright and contrasting colors in his paintings. A lot of people say that he had a illness called xanthopsia, where people see shades of yellow. And this may have helped him to have a better sense when it comes to seeing different colors and the different shades of them and the certain textures that he used. And he may have been able to see it more clearly than someone with regular vision may have. All right. On to the social cognitive theory. So, for the social cognitive theory relating to Van Gogh's personality, first off, he experienced many hard relationships with his family, friends, and other artists, including his parents, lovers that he had, and one of his roommates. These experiences, along with his hardships of failing, perpetuated his mental struggles. Also, Van Gogh took a lot of inspiration from other artists themselves and other artists' work. He spent a lot of time in museums and at art rooms and everything, studying paintings, trying to get an idea of what he might want to be influenced by. The final thing is his physical location. So, like I said, he lived in Netherlands and the south side of France. So, both of these having very strong European cultures, these factors definitely influenced his love for art, his cultural significance, his ideas of beauty, everything like that. So, for the psychodynamic theory, Van Gogh was raised by his father, who was a minister, and his mother, who was a very wealthy lady from the Netherlands. Art was extremely common in his family. All of his brothers were art curators or had something to do with art. So his love for art, which was a big part of his personality and his life, definitely came from his family. He also had to deal with some very unfortunate events as a child, which most likely instilled a few forms of trauma in him, like the death of his brother at a young age and also being sent away to boarding school. So making art alone was enough also for Van Gogh to release these emotions onto his pieces of work. And finally, Van Gogh shows the psychodynamic theory through acts of self-harm. So as everyone knows, Van Gogh cut off his own ear one night randomly due to some mental instability. But this could have been a way for him to cope with his unconscious feelings of failure or just cope with any sort of, hard relationships or anything that he was dealing with at the time. And similarly, Van Gogh unfortunately did commit suicide in 1890, and that shows even more signs of the unconscious distress that is shown in the psychodynamic theory. So the final theory that I'll be touching on is the humanistic theory. Van Gogh worked very hard to develop a career, and even through a lifetime of failure, he did his best to try to get better and better and really improve himself and self-actualize. Like I said, the constant struggle, he had constant failure. He wasn't very popular with his art during his actual lifetime. So these pressures put a lot of struggle onto him and his mental health. And then he kind of started to spiral, and this allowed for him to put those emotions back into his painting, however unfortunate it was. And then finally, as an artist, Van Gogh also relied on his ability to show his innermost thoughts through his paintings. So a lot of his paintings are just kind of like scenic artwork, but you can tell a lot of them have a sort of story to them, a sort of emotion, a sort of feeling, depending on kind of what kind of mental state he was in at the time. So, in my opinion, what theory do I think best describes Van Gogh? So I chose a mixture of two. I think mostly the psychodynamic theory describes him, but the biological theory has to have a little bit of input. So I use the nature versus nurture debate kind of to prove my points here. So for the psychodynamic theory, that's where the nurture comes from. Like I said, he had a very hard childhood, and I think a lot of his mental struggles came from him being kind of the black sheep of his family, his brother's death, and his mom always having unattainable expectations for him. According to these theories, these unfortunate events subconsciously manifested into his mental struggle and started to create his dark and serious personality, and might have been the reason why he wanted to express himself through his artwork. So also the biological theory, this is where the nature aspect comes in, because I think everyone can tell from Van Gogh's story, from all of everything told about him, he must have had some sort of chemical imbalance or some sort of issues with his brain or something along those lines. So that's where the nature aspect comes from. I'd say this theory really explains some aspects about Van Gogh's personality due to his innate susceptibility to these mental illnesses. But yeah, so those are how I relate Van Gogh to 4 psychological theories.